was that this prominent anesthesiologist in Atlanta had gotten in trouble for tax fraud. So a few years back, I think I was just going to college at the time, maybe end of high school, and I was hyper interested in fixing up a car. Right before this, I had done what's called a kit car. I didn't have any sort of high budget, so I was just thinking, how do I get myself in one of these cars? And the first video that ever made me like a car, get my eyes on a car, was when I was in 6th grade, and it turned out it was a Lamborghini Gallardo replica in England. And keep in mind, I had no idea what the difference between a Gallardo replica was and a real one. I knew what a kit car was all of a sudden before I was really in the car community. And so when I was really young, before I could drive, I was going into 7th grade. My older siblings had just gotten cars, and I said, okay, if I buy an old Toyota MR2 Spider, do all this work, buy this Ferrari 360 body kit, put it on the car, I'll basically end up with 4 or 5 years of just experience fixing the car, a lot of fun, and something that ultimately looks like a Ferrari 360. Now, I went through that for about 3 or 4 years until at the point when it actually drove and looked like a Ferrari 360 before being painted, my parents realized, are we really about to let our 16-year-old son get in a car he just built in the garage and go drive it? Absolutely not. In the end, I was very glad, because today I would not want to pull up to any sort of car show or anywhere in a kit car or a Ferrari replica. And so I was really still interested in this idea of like flipping cars and repairing cars. And I had an obsession with Ferrari at the time. I just really loved Ferrari. I liked classic Ferraris especially. I was looking at a lot of 355s, a lot of Testarossas, and I just saw all these interesting Ferraris going for really compelling prices compared to what you would see anything new at. And so I had known at this time from working on that car and a family friend, a body shop for probably 5 or 6 years that we just knew really well. And it's one of those body shops that they do extremely high quality work. I'm not going to negate that at all. It was one of those repair shops that was behind this row of dealerships. And so, you know, they just get things out the door fast. They are masters of covering things up. They have all the connections in the business because they can do any sort of repair you want. And I've been going there for years, knew them for years, and after taking this project car I was working on, this kit car there a few times, I'd seen this black Ferrari Testarossa there just sitting behind their shop, no cover over it for a long time. And I asked him about it one time, and he told me it had been there for almost a year at this point. And it was beautiful, nothing wrong with it. And the interesting backstory, all he knew at the time was that somebody had gotten in trouble with tax evasion, and somehow the car ended up at his shop and was just sitting there and had an unpaid storage retention bill for the months and months it had been sitting there. And he didn't know what to do with it. Months went by, I kept going back. I ended up selling the kit car I was working on, but was still interested in how can I fix up some sort of Ferrari, flip it, and have it for a little while, and just have a fun time working on cars. And one time I went back, and the Ferrari Testarossa, as I casually wandered around back, was entirely totaled. The front of it was pretty much off. It had no front bumper, no front left quarter panel, the hood was destroyed, and it was just sitting out there. But it was a beautiful example of a Ferrari Testarossa, no issues, black with black and tan interior, 2B race exhaust, and nothing wrong with it beforehand. Now I come back and it was totaled. And so I got to talking to him about to really figure out what was going on, because this fit exactly into what I was looking to do. Okay, I might have a connection that can help me purchase this Ferrari Testarossa. He wants it off of his hands. It's been sitting here for a long time, and obviously it needs to be restored now. But what's the story with it? Why is it still here, and why is it now crashed? And so it turns out what had happened was that this prominent anesthesiologist in Atlanta had gotten in trouble for tax fraud, or tax evasion maybe. But he had an extensive collection of cars. And like any smart tax evader, what he did was put them in other people's names right before he got in trouble. And so according to this body shop, all these random people around Atlanta that knew this guy now had these Ferraris and other high-end cars in their names. And so this particularly was his lawn maintenance guy, the person who took care of his house. And somehow he ended up with a Ferrari Testarossa in his name, presumably to give back at whatever point this guy got out of jail or got out of whatever bind he was in. But there was one time when, according to the body shop, he went to get it appraised to try to broker it. So he took it to a broker. He picked it up from the body shop after a year, took it to a broker, and on the way back, after not selling it, crashed the car. So after a few miles for the first time in a year, he crashed it. He had no money to pay to fix it. The guy was in jail. He was not communicating at all. But this guy, this lawn maintenance guy, wanted to sell it to get it off his hands, and he said he had coordinated it all with the guy in jail, the original owner, the true owner. And he said he had coordinated it all. Now the issue was, it was very hard to communicate with him. After going through the body shop for months and months and months, and their incentive was this guy was not paying any storage bills, the car was sitting there, they weren't fixing it, he didn't have the money to fix it, it was not insured. Insurance would see all the scam going on and not want any involvement. And so the dealership or the body shop had all the incentive to try to help us buy it, knowing we would restore it and use them for a lot of the work. So we had been communicating with this guy for 4 or 5 months, trying to purchase this car, trying to negotiate a price. And for some front end work on, I think at the time it was maybe Testarossas were going for 95 or 115, perfect condition. So a damaged one would probably be a little bit less than that, but maybe high 70s or something like that. And so he wanted $35,000 for it, for just some front end work. And we were like, this seems like a steal. This body shop, even if we don't do the restoration ourselves, is not quoting us a high price at all. We can get this done, enjoy this car for a while, and ultimately sell it, even at a salvage discount. So we kept talking to him, and we finally got to the point where he was interested in saying, okay, let's meet up, let's give us a check for this, let's go farther, until we got an even worse call from the body shop one time that this man, unfortunately, had a heart attack in the shower. And so now, nobody owned the car. They had no idea what to do with it. The guy who owned it is now dead, unfortunately. The guy who truly owned it is in jail. We can't contact him. And this body shop has no idea what to do with this car and said, we're sorry, we're not going to sell you this. We're not going to help sell it. We're just going to call an impound lot or someone and tell them to come pick up this car. So after months and months and months of seeing this car and then more months of trying to purchase this car and planning on restoring it from someone who was eager to sell it, we ended up not being able to buy it, and it was a very large disappointment. Now, that continued into understanding a lot of interesting stories with older Ferraris, because the one thing you don't want on a Ferrari is any sort of damage, any sort of strange history, lack of maintenance records, anything like that, because that is what makes a buyer not want to buy it, makes the car impossible to sell. And so going off of that last experience, I was starting to try to sell cars for people. Primarily what I was doing was I was charging people a listing fee, so I would just make a very nice listing, take professional photos for them, and ultimately just list their car on eBay, Auto Trader, websites like that for them and help them sell it, rather than going to a dealership. Now, this was no hyper robust business, this was just me having a good time and making some money. And what I really liked to target to sell were older Ferraris. And so I met this guy who, the stranger part is, I don't know how he found out about me. I got a text one day saying, I hear you sell Ferraris. I have one, are you interested? And I said, of course, like, yeah, what can I do for you? And it turns out it was a Ferrari 575, beautiful condition. And at the time, I think, once again, they were going for high 90s, maybe upwards of 100. I'm not sure the exact price, but of course, like any Ferrari owner, he wanted exactly what a dealership would sell it for you for if it was in a Ferrari museum. He wanted the top of the line market. I said, okay. We went through it, we took some pictures, we made it look very nice. We said, okay, this could probably do pretty well. This is a well-maintained Ferrari. It doesn't appear to have any issues, any damage, anything like that. At the time, he provided me a Carfax report, so I wasn't worried at all. I looked through it and said, okay, this has clearly been maintained, no issues, no accidents reported. And we listed on a few websites. And at one point, we got in touch with a mutual friend who was buying Ferraris, and selling them to his customers, so he was consigning them, and he wanted to purchase this Ferrari based on the photos and what we were telling him that I was helping this guy sell. Once we actually got more and more photos to him, got the VIN to him, etc., we heard back from him saying, "What are you doing? This VIN does not belong to this Ferrari. This is a completely different car. What are you trying to sell? Like, I'm very confused. I thought I had a buyer exactly for this car. Now I have to tell them that's not it. It doesn't exist." And I was very taken aback, saying, okay, I've met this guy. I've gone through the car. Like, what could be wrong? And it turns out I didn't do enough diligence to actually look through the VIN number on the car to make sure it was the one aligned to what we were listing, what I was told, the documents I was given, just to say, yeah, that's great, sure, I'll list this. And it turns out this gentleman had been exactly like I had been. He found a salvage Ferrari that needed some repairs, thought he could make a huge chunk of cash, bought it for maybe $20,000 or $30,000, did all the repairs locally in Tennessee, and then thought he could contact someone in Atlanta and just get it sold where a big Ferrari hub is, big Ferrari of Atlanta dealership, and same issue. So started speaking with him, and yes, it came out this car was completely salvaged before, completely repaired, and from then on, we had to try to negotiate that, okay, this price is gonna be maybe 20%, if not more, less, now that this car has a salvage title. And ultimately, I realized never try to sell a salvage or damaged Ferrari, especially not at market price, because it'll take months to sell if it sells at all. So not the best experience in the end.
If you like that story, it's time to make one of your own. Extreme Experience puts you in the driver's seat of some of the world's best supercars at over 20 racetracks from coast to coast, with no speed limits, no shifting restrictions, and no governors. Head to the link to choose your supercar, find a racetrack near you, and start making a story of your own. Extreme Experience. It's your turn.